Hey everybody, it's Eric Dreiman, coming to you live from Fire Department Instructors Conference 2023. I'm the host of the Hooks and Hoses podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. Got my friend Jake Barnes here with me, another currently a Hoosier boy from southern part of the state. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks, brother. Glad to be on.
Thanks a lot. Tell us a little bit about yourself for the folks who are just being introduced to you for the first time.
Sure. So I work in New Albany, Indiana, all the way south, the best part of Indiana, and I'm the training officer there. Prior to that, I worked for Lexington, Kentucky Fire Department, and then I got my start in the Air Force as a firefighter, and also podcaster like yourself.
Yep. Has his own podcast, The 3-Point Firefighter, so check it out if you have time. After you've listened to the Hooks and Hoses podcast, of course.
Absolutely.
But, that goes without saying. So we are here live at FDIC, the Fire Department Instructors Conference, the largest conference in the world. So when we think about FDIC, we think about training, we think about learning new things, we think about getting better at our craft. So as we go through that, Jake and I were talking before the podcast about what are we going to talk about, different areas we want to discuss, and one of the things that we kind of came up with was talking about the science and how some of the science has changed over the years, and it seems like we've had the science for a while now that we've been trying to digest and learn. And I think for many of us, we've kind of finally embraced it, as an industry, and starting to understand how important it is to know what that science is and how it works, and what we've been doing hasn't always been wrong. It's just maybe the way we were applying it in some circumstances wasn't quite right. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about training and how we can make training a little bit more realistic, or not realistic versus relevant. We had this debate before we started. So we were just trying to decide what to call it. So realistic versus relevant, and some of those points. So as we get going, Jake, I know you're heavily involved in a lot of the scientific background of the fire service today, and your basement fire class, and traveling around the country and doing the 1700 program now and 1403 programs that you do. I know we've got similar time in the fire service, so we don't have all the exact same experiences, but we're roughly the same age, so some of our experiences are probably very similar. But I know that there's certainly a lot that's changed since I was first introduced to the fire service back in the early 90s. What are some things that you think, based upon your experiences and your travels, where you think we're starting to get it right, and what are some areas where you think we're maybe still have a little bit to go with the science and some of the new thought process?
Yeah, the science is out there for us. The work has been done. The heavy lifting has been done. And like you mentioned, I work for the ISFSI, kind of my side hustle. Mm-hmm. And they work right along with FSRI and NIST. And so that information comes straight to us, and we're able to push it out. Mm-hmm. The problem that I'm seeing, though, is people don't necessarily want to embrace it all the way because they've had experiences that they feel are the real thing and not the science.
Yeah. And
one of them, the biggest one that I've seen, is the fact about pushing fire. Mm-hmm. People swear to this day. I've got people that have been in the fire service longer than me and higher ranks than me, and they will argue that, no, I've seen water push fire. Water pushes fire. And I tell them it doesn't. And what they don't realize is they're looking from their only perspective. And I usually follow it up with, well, if you think water pushes fire, the time you're thinking about it happening, what was the ventilation profile? Was the front door open? Was a window open? Was the roof open? Because that is going to change the fire's, the flow path, right? It's going to go from high to low, and high pressure, low pressure. And if you're there and you're spraying water, unfortunately the fog nozzle, sounds like, then I think you're just making, correlation and causation, two different things. So I have to have that argument, seems like a lot of times.
So would you say there's a difference between saying that we can push fire versus we can push heat?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Expand on that.
Because I have my own opinion. While we may not necessarily push fire, I think that depending upon how you apply water and what the ventilation profile is, you can push that heat wave or that extremely superheated air, and certainly the superheated gases that are present from a fire. It may not push the fire, itself, but I do feel like I've experienced situations where that heat front is pushed as a result of the air currents that are created either by misapplication of the water or just, maybe not misapplication, but just applying the water with limited ventilation.
Right.
I do feel like that does happen. Even though you may say, well, we don't technically push fire, I think we, in some instances, can push heat.
That sounds reasonable, and it kind of makes sense with what we're doing inside that fire. When we are creating a low pressure. So if you think about it, heat is high pressure and the cool air is the low pressure, and heat always wants to go to low. It makes sense if we're going in there that we are actually creating if we're doing it right, a lower pressure. Along those lines, though, think about this. If you haven't effectively ventilated and coordinated with a fire attack team, say for example, you have a bidirectional flow path through a door, and you're going in and apply water and put that fire out. Well, if you don't have the right ventilation, that low pressure you're making is now going to be behind you. So what's that fire going to want to do?
Yeah.
If you don't have effective ventilation on the other side or above, however you do it, it's going to come over you. So I agree, and I think that another big problem we have is coordinated ventilation.
I would agree.
I've seen it time and time again where our default setting is we go to the roof, we cut a 4x4 hole, we open it up, we go on the radio and say, okay, we got a hole. At no time do you hear, hey, we're on the roof, what are the inside conditions? Just give a roof report, what's going on? And then let the company know inside, hey, we're getting ready to open this vent hole. Because we have to work together. And I think we're basing a lot of our success on lack of failure.
Right.
We do it all the time and nobody got hurt. Look at the Challenger. It was the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I think, particularly, I see it less with vertical ventilation than I do with horizontal ventilation, but I think both of them are important, but especially horizontal ventilation. You think about, when we do vertical vent, normally, at least in our organization, you've got 8 people or 6 people stretching hand lines while typically 2 or 3 people are going to the roof. So those hand lines can, barring any sort of snafu or difficult forcible entry, are going to be inside prior to the roof getting popped. But that's not the same when you've got a truck crew, member of a truck crew with a flathead axe or a pike pole, and all they have to do is walk around to the side of the house or the side of the building, and they can take glass, and they many times will beat the engine company in if they're not cognizant of the need to coordinate that. And I do think that, I know just in my teachings and dealings on the street, is I always tried to focus on making sure that we coordinate with that crew inside, making sure that you're hearing the water, trying to identify where the fire is. Don't break glass where it's going to potentially draw fire or draw that heat into an area that we don't want it, right? Because at the end of the day, people say, well, glass is cheap. Okay, in the grand scheme of things for a home, that may be true, but at the same time, people aren't cheap. And if we just break glass because it's cheap, and we have that mindset, then we could potentially end up hurting our firefighters or killing or severely injuring a victim.
What if you open up the wrong window and there's little Timmy in his Spider-Man pajamas right below that window?
Right.
Yeah. So ventilation is it's a science and an art, and I feel like it's treated as just a step, or it's not treated with the humility it should be treated with. That it is literally going to change everything about that building. Now, and you're hoping that you change it strategically, and you have somebody coming in with water to do the rest of the work. So when I see people opening up roofs without coordinated ventilation, the argument is always, well, I'm making it better for the guys inside and the victims inside because I'm getting that heated gas and stuff out. Yes, but if you haven't coordinated and there's a hiccup with that line, then what's going to happen is that fire is now going to get worse. it's going
Right.
to get
It
worse.
will.
So you gotta add that second step. The first step is, yeah, you're right. It's gonna make everything better inside if I vertically vent. But if you do not get water on that fire, you've literally done the opposite. You've
Right.
created a problem now.
Yeah.
So I kind of get on a soapbox about that, because I feel like we really just do it to do it. We don't.
Right.
We're firefighters are smart, even truckies to an extent, and we should use our intelligence. We should go, you know what? We're smart people. Do we have to vent? We don't have to vent every single time.
No, not at all. No, I was just at a class, and I won't say where it was or when it was, but just at a recent live fire program where we were using a burn building, and I had some people helping me out, doing a great job. We'd knock down the fire in between groups, in between evolutions. So they would open the window vent, to vent the heat, in their words, vent the heat from the fire room so they could go back in and reload it, reset the props, all that sort of thing. But what they didn't realize was that initially the heat, that you're getting the heat out when the fire is initially knocked down, but at some point the return on your investment to open that horizontal vent goes away. And they were like, man, I can't believe how hot it is. We've got the vent open. And I said, the reason it's getting so hot is because you're allowing all this fresh air in.
Yep.
And, the fuel, just part of the reason that the fuel isn't burning is because certainly because you cooled it and knocked the fire down. But now you've let all that steam, everything out, you're letting fresh air in, and guess what? The fire's taking off, right? And, I say that, you can use a Weber charcoal grill is an excellent fire behavior tool. And you can demonstrate it even a gas grill, but I'm a charcoal guy. So when you're cooking, what do you have when you're cooking to control the amount of heat you have in a grill? You got a vent on the bottom, vent on the top, right? What happens when you open the vent on the top and the vent on the bottom? In many instances, temperature goes up. You open the lid, you get a flare up. What happens when you shut the lid?
Goes down.
It goes out, right?
I like
That's
that.
isolation. That's controlling the flow path. You've got a flow path there. I mean, it's simple as we're grilling a hamburger, right? You got flow path. You got fire conditions you're dealing with. You can isolate the fire room, in this case the grill. Fire goes out. Next thing,
That's how I know you're a true fire nerd, that you're cooking at your house and you're going, and you're doing flow path with your burgers. I love it.
Between my grill and my fireplace, my kids have had more fire behavior classes than probably most kids in recruit school. I mean, we don't do it so much now because they're just like, oh God, Dad, can't we just start the fire? Can't we just make some s'mores? Not everything has to be educational, so I kind of laid off. But yeah, when they were all younger, man, I was like, look at this, and this is why this happens. And
that is awesome. I'm totally stealing that, man. That is awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, what about training? Let's kind of take that other side that we were talking about, or I brought up earlier. Let me stop just a second. I know it's almost 10:30. My understanding is that at 10:30, the bagpipe band is going to be coming through. So it's probably we probably already got a little bit of background noise just from the foot traffic. But my guess is it's going to get really loud here in just a very short time with the bagpipes and the drummers coming through. My hope is that we could continue the podcast and have a conversation, but if we have to stop for the noise, just bear with us, and we'll get back on track as soon as the noise level allows. But so we were talking about, we're here at the greatest fire conference in the world. All this knowledge here, and we were talking a little bit earlier before the show started about how to go about making sure that the training that we're providing is relevant and practical and applicable for the fires we're going to. And we've probably both had horror story experiences where we've been put in situations, something's demonstrated once real quick, maybe on a fire ground, and then you're immediately thrust into it, and you got instructors yelling at you, and you got instructors, that say you have to do it blacked out the first time, and it might be a complex skill or even a simple skill that you've just never been introduced to before. I think those leave, as you say, those training scars, right?
Right.
And our whole goal is to try and eliminate those, whether it's don't put the fire completely out because we got to let the next group come in and and restoke the fire. That creates training scars.
Yes.
These other instances where we're putting people in and just hammering them from the get-go can create training scars. So how do we what are some things that you think through your experiences we can do to help minimize those training scars and help make the training, particularly the hands-on training, but all training in general, a little better for our firefighters?
When it comes to like new recruits, we have to realize our job isn't to abuse them.
Right.
It's not to find out what they can take. How much heat can you take and how much yelling. That's an antiquated thought. It is a generational issue, and if you're still doing it, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah.
With that said, I have seen some stuff that Miami does that they're not abusing anybody, but they take a more military approach, and I think that's fine. It's when you have people that just, like you said, they'll just get new people and they'll throw them in something and say, go to work and scream and yell and make it as difficult as possible. You're not creating a firefighter, you're creating a victim. That's what you're doing. Yeah. And we have to realize, as instructors, we know one of the first rules of being a good instructor is knowing your audience. How you got to know your audience and how you're going to present to your audience. Well, recruits are the same way. To me, they're probably the bravest people we have because they joined our department. They made that, they're like, okay, I'm going to take a very dangerous job. I'm going to involve my family because of shift work, heart attacks, cancer, all this stuff. They're brave by just taking the job. So we don't need to test their mettle. What we need to do is we need to teach them.
Yeah.
We just need to teach them. My favorite thing is when people say, and I've heard this a lot, and I always use a chainsaw as an example because that's what I do here a lot. Chief, can you believe this guy never started a chainsaw? Oh my God. I'm like, and? Well, but why are we hiring these people? I'm like, first off, you're an officer. Your job is to teach. Yeah. If they don't know how to start a chainsaw, teach them how to start a chainsaw, man. Honestly, you're in a better position because you don't have to overcome bad habits. You're instilling good habits from the get-go. Right. But I think, and a lot of times our ego, the longer we're in the fire service, the bigger our ego gets. And we're like, we know everything, blah, blah, blah. And we don't. We really don't. If you think you know everything in this fire department, come to FDIC. I promise you that'll change your mind. But we got to treat these people with the respect and humility that we should because they're our brothers and sisters. Right. They're not punching bags. And I guarantee you, if you grew up in the time frame we didn't like it. No. Why would we, keep doing that? So I get mad when I think about that stuff. Sorry.
No, it's it's a good conversation to have, both, whether you're a training officer, whether you're a company officer, whether you're a battalion chief, whether you're just another firefighter who's got somebody new that work with them. And we're fortunate that in our organizations, we run a, quote, true fire academy. We bring our folks in. We have a significant amount of time to actually focus on teaching them the skills and the way we want them to do the skills and the terminology we want them to use and that sort of thing. A lot of departments don't have that, whether it's a smaller career department, whether it's a volunteer department. They don't have that luxury of running an academy and having a captive audience, right? So, in the case of a volunteer organization or a paid on call or something like that, it might be every Saturday from 8 to 4, we're going to run our fire academy, or Wednesday nights, or whatever your drill night is, and it's important for us as instructors to know, regardless of how small or large our organization is, that we've got to know our audience, right?
Yes.
As you mentioned earlier, and in this, more and more people, we see them here, and I know you see them, and it's all over the country. We're not getting folks who were in the trades before they came on the fire department like we used to. We're getting college educated. We've had lawyers, we've had accountants, we've had CPAs, we've got people with master's degrees that come through our academies now, and it's that aspect of it has, in some ways, created challenges for us because, as you said, some of these people don't have the hands-on skills, the wrench, turning wrenches and knowing how to start a chainsaw and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, they're extremely intelligent, very bright, and one thing that we have and I feel it's a great thing. I'm not going to downplay it, but as instructors today, we've never been fact-checked more than we are now because we can be teaching a class and we can say that in 1923, this and happened, and because of this is why the fire service is the way it is today. Some student in our class or recruit, if they have access to their cell phone,
they're looking at
is going to look it up, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And And so not only do you have to be on point as far as knowing your audience, but you also have to be on point with the information you're providing, because they're going to fact check you. Not every time maybe, but in many instances they're going to say, I was looking at this and I know you said it's a counterclockwise thread, but this article says it's not counterclockwise, it's clockwise, so which is it? And then you end up, if you aren't ready, you end up with egg on your face. So
there's a lot of value as an instructor or a company officer going, I don't know, or even better,
exactly.
I was wrong. I was wrong, but thank you for giving me that information. If anybody knows me, knows I'm wrong a lot. And I'm not afraid to admit it. But that you're exactly right. The generational differences kill me, because here's the phrase I cannot stand is when somebody says this younger generation in the fire service, they're killing us. I'm like, they're absolutely not. The problem is your ego is so big, you're not willing to learn the differences. They bring so much value to what we do. We have to embrace their side. If your ultimate goal is to make a better community, and you work backwards from that, then you got to have a better fire department, you got to have better leadership, blah, blah, blah. You have to understand that you're going to have to understand and work with different generations. And it's not a bad thing. And just be open-minded, learn about the generational differences, because that's what we're talking about.
Right.
And I think each generation brings value, and like you said, we're getting smarter firefighters. We're getting... If they have a college education, I don't care what it's in, that is showing me they showed up in one place for 4 years and put in a lot of hard work, and they were willing to spend a lot of money. So that shows me drive, passion, and dedication. So why would you not want that? I think it's great.
Exactly. Yeah. I've always said that I would like to think that I'm fairly well educated. I don't know everything, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't know everything. But I've always said that. You do more harm by saying that, by faking it till you make it. With, if somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, the best thing you can do for your reputation and to make sure that that person gets the correct information is, you know what, I don't know, but I know somebody who will.
Exactly.
That was because, as a chief officer and when I was the chief of training, I would tell people I don't know everything. My responsibility is to know somebody who knows everything, right? So I might know 15 or 20 different people, but between all of them, they're probably going to know the answer to just about any question that gets asked if I don't know it, right?
Absolutely.
So being humble enough to say that, just because you got bars or bugles on your uniform doesn't mean that you're the be-all, end-all, know-all.
No, it means you're the guy that's not afraid to stand up in front of people and try to help.
Right.
And but you know what? Another thing too is to be, if you want your department to have a really good training program, okay, you have to be a good student. And I don't think we think about that enough, is that if you go to your trainings and you're sitting like this and you're not listening and you're trying to always create a problem, then you are a problem in the training, right? And we see this all the time as instructors, is you see the guy like here or he's on his phone, and or the guy that's just waiting to find something wrong with what you said. I've been really thinking about this a lot lately, is that it's not on the training officer to create a great training culture. It really isn't. He might be the pilot of the plane, but it's the people, it's the officers. They're setting the tone. If they're bad-mouthing training, if they're trying to make the training officer look bad, then they are creating the very problem they like to complain about. I had a guy in one of my classes. I was teaching a class. Let's just say the class was on ladders. It wasn't, but we'll call it ladder training. Now, this particular subject I was not really good on, and I kind of avoided it for a while. So I said, you know what? I need to get better at this. So I learned ladders, and I learned a ton about them, and it made me a better person, I think. Walk into the class the first time. There is a officer with a book, and the book was all about ladders. It wasn't, but it was a book on the subject I was teaching. And I looked at it and I said, well, what do you got there? He goes, it was the something Bible is what it was, a ladder Bible. And he said, oh, I got this because I'm going to get you today. I'm going to catch you today. That's how he said, and he meant it. That's what he wanted to do. That set the tone for the rest of the class. Now, I got lucky and did not get busted by it, but that was an officer. Now let's back. Do you think that officer was bragging about bringing that ladder book to get me before the class? I guarantee he was. And he's making a big spectacle. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And it drives me nuts, and it got me thinking. I'm like, there is a responsibility for the students to make that training culture and to support training. And I know you see this in your own department. You might not have that, but you go train somewhere else and you got nothing but great help. It's no one's a prophet in their own land.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to training, is for students to realize they have a huge part to play.
Yeah, they do. I think it's, as you said, it's important to drive that culture. I think that, really, I've always advocated for this is, as you said, it's not the training officer's responsibility to make a culture of training, but, you hear officers say, well, this group of recruits or this one particular recruit doesn't know anything. Well, I beg to differ. They do know something. Maybe they weren't the strongest recruit, or maybe they're not the strongest probie, but, rather than complaining to me about it, what are you doing about it, right? And I know that I see this a lot, not just with recruits, but you have a battalion chief or a company officer come to you and they say, so-and-so is a horrible engineer, can't put the apparatus in pump, gets lost, doesn't know how many hand lines they got off, they need to go back through training. Well, maybe they do, but what have you done? Don't make the default, don't make your problem my problem,
Right.
What's the, what have you done, Lieutenant, Captain, Chief, leading up to you contacting me? If you've done all those things, then I would say that maybe that person needs to, go through some remedial training with one of our, academy instructors, potentially.
Right.
But don't make the default to punt, right? First and 10, don't punt to us just because you don't want to, So, being a former training division guy, I can say that because I had those conversations. And, prior to that, I was on the other side of it as a company officer and having a little bit better understanding than maybe some people do, that you've got to do your due diligence and you've got to do the upfront work. And if I've got three other people working for me, it's my responsibility to make sure that they know what they're doing, because they might screw something up and feel bad about it, but it's ultimately that company officer's reputation and that company's reputation that is going to suffer from that. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and farther up the food chain you go, the more your reputation depends on the people working for you, right?
Yes. You notice Brotherhood stops. Brotherhood goes all the way up to the training officer, and that's where it stops.
Right.
Like in the firehouse, everybody's helping each other and everything. But once you hit the training officer level, it's like, you're not doing this right. You need to do this. You need to fix this. I'm like, How about we fix this? How about we work on it?
Yeah.
I've just little things I've noticed.
Yeah. So, being here at FDIC, what are some of the classes that you've taken? Some of the people that you've had the opportunity to interact with, that you would say, hey, if you're coming to FDIC, whether later this week or you couldn't make it this year, but you're coming back next year, what are some areas and things that you feel like are worth seeing? I mean, it's all worth seeing, obviously, but
oh yeah,
but,
there's
certainly folks or classes that stick out to you, or
absolutely. The one I really wanted to take and I didn't get a chance to, but I encourage everybody to, is Coralie Moore's class. I think he's amazing. He's changing the landscape of the fire service, and he's doing it somewhat easily. But when you come to FDIC, here's the beauty of it. You could be a new recruit, and you could be a 30-year fire chief, and there's classes here for you. There's things to do. I was thinking about this morning when I was walking up here. If I go to my fire department, I'm not picking my fire department, I'm using my fire department as an example. If you go to my fire department, you're going to find some people that probably don't want to be there. Right? And there's going to be some people that are not engaged in the fire service. You might find people that are just counting down the days till they retire. So you have that. But when you come here, you have none of that. Everybody comes here voluntarily because they love the fire service and they're trying to get better. And I think it should be worn as a badge of honor that you attended FDIC, because it is the greatest conference, period, end of story.
Yeah, it is. We're lucky to have those here. I know for me, it's I get a lot out of Phil Jost does a really good job with his smoke reading class, and certainly Mo Davis, who's this is Mo's here for the first time this year. Coralie Moore, I would agree, does a lot of stuff. There's a lot of just really good classes, and certainly there's the, quote unquote big names that we all kind of, you say their name and you immediately recognize who they are, where they're from, what department they're with.
Yeah.
But there are so many people teaching classes here. You wouldn't be teaching here if you weren't tier 1, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest, you're here because you've got something to offer the fire service, whether you work for a very small fire department or you work for a very large fire department, right? Whether you've got 10 years on the job or 30 years on the job. So you're going to get something out of any class you take, regardless of where, what the topic is here.
Right.
But it's good, it's just unbelievable. If you've never been to FDIC and you're in the fire service, beg, borrow, or steal, figure out a way to get here, because every firefighter should experience it at least once.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So let's go back to pivot back over to kind of like our first topic we started off with. We were talking about the science, and for those of you that don't know, I had Jake on last month on the show, or 2 months ago now, I guess it was, and we talked about basement fires and fighting basement fires and some of the science and that goes along with that. And I was fortunate enough to sit through Jake's basement fire class. They came, his crew came to Indianapolis a couple of years ago now, maybe.
Yes, sir. I think it's
two or
about
three,
2 or 3 years ago.
At least, I say, well, it was just last year, and then you'll say, no, it was 3 years ago or something. So it's just time runs away from us. But
yeah.
So I know it was the last couple of years. His group came in, and you've done that all over the country, right? I mean, you've done it in New York City, you've done it in Philadelphia. I know you did it for us. You've done it for a lot of big departments and smaller departments, alike. But just all that information that you can provide, and we talked about earlier about making the training relevant, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to put, and your group was a perfect example of that. We didn't have to put people in a basement fire to talk about basement fire stuff. We had that little classroom demonstration part.
Had those little skill stations.
Yeah. And if you haven't had the chance to take that class, I would encourage you to do that. But from a scientific perspective, again, explain to the audience a little bit about those experiments that we did in class with the candles and burning the wood and all that sort of stuff.
So the ISFSI, International Society of Fire Service Instructors, again, work hand in hand with FSRI, so all this information comes straight to us, and then we were able to develop these classes. Well, for the 1700 class and the basement fire, we have like a fire dynamics lab, and candles and like steel wool and cotton and small pieces of wood, and it's amazing what these program developers have come up with to teach conduction, convection, radiation, and the importance of mass and the effects of fire on that. I've had candle classes before, this is convection, but this is they've designed a great course. So yeah, we did that for the basement fire class, and it's that crawl. We talked about this earlier, crawl, walk, run, right? That should be your goal as a training officer, and I think the ISFSI almost exclusively builds their stuff under that crawl, walk, run idea, but they can do it within 2 days. So if you remember, that was a 2-day class. And then we ended up with live fire at the end. And I got to learn, every time I teach that class, I learn something new and different. So that basement fire is a great class, and we have that science to back up what we're doing. 1700 is the same way. 1700, a newer standard, the Guide to Structural Firefighting, incorporates that science stuff. There's a lot on ventilation. We talked about ventilation earlier, and there's some old things that I thought were never going to happen again, but science is now coming back and saying you can do this positive pressure attack. That used to be a thing 25, 30 years ago, and now it's coming back based on science. So it's a great thing. You can do all kinds of things with the candle experiment, and it sets the tone for the rest of the day. So now when you're going to the next station, there's a bunch of people. Then you go to that next station, you've already got that knowledge, you're preloaded, and then you can apply it on a bigger scale. And then by day 2, you're in that fire, live fire, doing the basement fire, and it applies just as well. So we go around the country and teach this everywhere, and we don't change that course for the department. right? We don't go to FDY and say, we got to do this special, or we don't go to a small town USA and say we got to change this. We take the same information, the same class, and it's received the same way every time. It's easy to sell something when you're backing it up with science.
It
right?
is, yeah. And I went through that when I went to one of the initial programs that they offered in Howard County, Maryland, that Dan Majikowski and Steve Kerber did through the ISFSI on all the fire behavior. And I just remember, something as simple as burning styrofoam and just all that little stuff that we did, and using the wire mesh to show what it does to the flame and everything. It was just like, this is cheap. I could do.
Yes.
Give me $20 and I can go to Dollar General and I can get all this stuff and we can, just learn all this from it. It's
and the beauty
cool.
of it is too, like for new recruits, it's invaluable. But you take somebody that's been on the job 10, 12 years, and they've been in enough fire now that when you burn a piece of styrofoam and that dark black soot starts coming off of it, they immediately go, I've been in that fire. Okay, well, what was burning? Oh, it was a couch.
Right.
Well, there you go. You're really tying it in perfectly with that stuff. I'd love to take credit for that, but man, that's not me. That's the people that design our programs, and like you said, Matt Drakowski and them doing all the hard work for us.
Yeah.
We just got to deliver it.
Right. No, it's great. So I'm less familiar with the 1700 program that you guys are starting to do. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what all that encompasses? And
yes, it's amazing. If you're a training officer, 1700 is what you want. It's called a Guide to Structural Firefighting, and it came out in 2019. So it's not like it's been revised a bunch of times. It's brand new, and it's rooted in that science that we like so much. And it talks about everything. So if you're a training officer and you're like, okay, what do we need to work on? You've got a very wide blueprint, and you got the science to back it up. If you want to just do ventilation, you want to just read the ventilation chapter and apply that. If you want to apply all of it, the very last chapter, I think it's chapter 13, it's called How to Implement 1700, and there's a 12-step process. So, it is one of the neatest standards I think there is. I'm a nerd. I love that kind of stuff. So you could actually take that 1700, give it to a training person, and say, okay, you're a brand new training person. Here's the basics, man. Here it is, right here. And then, of course, you have chapter 2, I believe, is the reference publication. So all the stuff that was built with, you can go back there. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I get to teach it in Olathe, Kansas here in 2 weeks, and then in Prescott Valley, September, I believe. So I get kind of excited teaching that stuff. It's great.
Yeah, and you get to see the country.
And I get to see the country. I do. I
cool.
love it. I hate flying. I used to have to be somewhat impaired to fly, and then I just quit flying altogether. And then my doctor just said, hey, you know what? You could actually take a Valium and fly, and it'd be okay. And I'm like, what? If it wasn't for that, I couldn't be doing it. Because
Really?
I cannot stand to fly.
Really?
Yes, I cannot do it. So now, before I fly, I take like a little half of a Valium. I get on the plane, no problems. I'm not like, and then I can do what I want to do. Because I'm telling you, it's not for me. Yeah. It's not. It's just like my first marriage, man. It's just not. It's not for me, man. It just ain't for me.
Yeah. Now, is the 1700 class, is it a 2-day class also?
It's a 2-day class. It isn't live fire, but it's very like the basement fires. You got a lot of skill-based rotations, and then you come together for a great big scenario with VES and hose movement and hydraulic ventilation, and you have a command part of it, and you're rotating through it. It is really, really neat. It's neat to see it all come together in those 2 days, and it's really good, really good.
Yeah, good. All right, well, we're getting close to wrapping up here, so got any final thoughts, any words of wisdom for the audience?
Well, I'd like to point out, I've got a big ego, so I've got to point out that I'm the first 2-time Fishbowl podcast person. Yes, so I'm looking at getting a tattoo on my neck that says that. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe I can be on a few more. I don't know how this is happening to me, but yeah, I like to brag on that. What else? Listen to Hooks and Hoses, great podcast.
Thank you.
Love it very much. I was fortunate enough that I know you before the podcast.
Yeah.
So you're so genuine and authentic. I think that's what helps your podcast. That's why I really, really like it. And I love your topics on there too. So people have to listen to that. And I think it's absolutely made for the training officer. I really think a training officer needs to listen to that, and they're going to learn an awful lot about it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Other than that, I don't know what else to tell you.
We had to he wouldn't fit through the door, so we had to get 2 straight ladders and crisscross them to get over the walls because his head was too wide.
First 2-time Fishbowl podcast. I think I should have a trophy or something.
Yeah.
So
You'll have to talk to the ladies out there about that. Yeah.
I don't think you'll let me come back on ever again.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jake, really appreciate you being
Brother,
here, man.
thank you so much.
It's been a lot of fun.
An absolute honor, and thank you all for letting me do this
Yeah.
again.
Thanks. Yeah. Jake and I have. Seems like lately we've been seeing more and more of each other.
Yeah. Tell them what we're going to be doing today at 1 o'clock.
Well, I'm going to be doing a podcast for Jake here at 1 o'clock. We're going to be talking about the new Indianapolis Fire Department training tower produced by Fire Facilities.
Amazing place.
Yeah, great place. I may have had a little bit to do with it.
Or everything to do with it.
Well, yes. Anyway, so as we wrap up today, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm Eric Dreiman, host of the Hooks and Hoses podcast, and look forward to seeing you all out at FDIC, and tune in for the episodes of Hooks to Hoses to come. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good day. Thanks a lot, man.
Oh, thank you, man.